This is Jeff Krisman, and I'm very joyous and very grateful this afternoon to have the opportunity to visit with the Reverend Dr. Tony Petrinovich. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
You are so welcome and good with the name.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I do try. What I wanted to do, first of all, before we begin the conversation is, and this is something that is very heartfelt as I read about you, and even though I don't necessarily know a lot about you, and that's the idea of having this conversation, I wanted to honor, there was two things that really, actually three, that really spoke to me when I read about you. And I really wanted to honor your work and of course your journey and the work that you do as a teacher, helping the people, your students that you work with, to accept their divinity and also to help them to question, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, but to loosen their grip on the beliefs that they have, or the way that their beliefs, and I definitely do want to talk about this with you more as far as the way that we cling to beliefs and letting go of those things. And then also to take people to the edge that they've avoided for years. And I assume in that case, this is with their permission, but that is something that I see tremendous value in all of these things. So I'd really like to speak to not only the teacher, but also the human being. And so I wanted to start out with, just to get a sense of you and your journey, if I could ask you what this work that you have done over the years with students and your own journey means to you at a deeper level.
Well, it's my life. I like to say, often people will say, how did you get to be the way you are? And I say, I cheated. I came this way. I didn't have to figure it out. It was already there.
Yeah.
And so it really began when I was about the age 5. My father was killed in a hunting accident when I was 5. And I was named after him. I was supposed to be a boy. My mother wasn't too much in favor of me because I was a girl. And after my father died, she came in and she told me that my father wasn't coming back anymore and that I would be the father now. And I remember the words, "And so it begins," that I heard.
Wow.
And as I continued to grow up as a child, I was raised in the Catholic Church, the old Roman Catholic Church with the Latin Mass and the whole works. I finally decided that the only place that I could actually be and be comfortable was in a cloister. And we were friends with the Carmelite cloistered nuns in Reno. This was in Reno, Nevada. So I decided I would become a cloistered nun because I was living in two worlds at the same time. I was living here as a child, a very mature child, being dad, and I had a younger sister. And at the same time, I was living in a world that was etheric. And no one could understand what I was talking about most of the time. And most of the nuns, of course, didn't believe any of it. And so when I was in high school, in a Catholic high school, there was a big uproar within the faculty there because one of the monks was doing things that were not appropriate with some of the young ladies. And he was a monk that I used to pray with. And because I prayed with him, they assumed that I was one of the other girls. So there was this big uproar, and I didn't know what anybody was talking about. I was like, what's this? But what it did is it thrust me out of the Catholic Church because I realized that what I had been taught to believe wasn't real. And that was perfect because that's what needed to be. So then I ended up going to San Francisco. I met the Holy Order of Mans, and Master Paul there was the first person that ever understood what I was talking about. And he said, not only do I understand what you're talking about, we can take this further. I can go with you on this journey. So I stayed there for a couple of years and then realized that, and I was teaching with him, and I realized that eventually that I had done everything I could do there. And I came back to Nevada. Meanwhile, I had gotten married and had children and what have you. So I just began teaching on my own then. And this was like 1972. And so I have been ever since. At the same time, I ended up getting divorced, and at the same time that I had to work to support my children and me. So I worked in the legal profession as a legal secretary, and I would work during the day, I would teach at night, I would teach on the weekends until 1998. My children had grown up. I had moved to Washington State, and I thought, I don't need to work in the world anymore, not that way. So I just started Sacred Spaces so that I could teach, just teach, and only do that. And that's what I've been doing since.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely honor that journey. I was going to ask you, just getting some sense of, in the beginning when you were teaching, just getting some idea of if that has evolved some in terms of just how you have evolved as a teacher, and maybe as far as how you worked with students at that time before you started doing this full time, and then how that if or how that looks different than it does today, just in terms of how you work with students.
Well, one thing that changed was when I moved to Washington State from Nevada. I moved to a city of Anacortes in Washington State, which is the gateway to the San Juans. You had asked me when we were talking personally before we got on to this call where I was, and I'm in the San Juan Islands. When I was living in Anacortes, I was an hour and a half from Seattle, from SeaTac, the airport. So it was easy to go back and forth, especially if I took, early morning flights or late night flights so I didn't get in the traffic. So I just taught workshops just around the world, flying and being personally present with people, which is a different experience than digitally. When I met my partner, Philip, in 2003, and I moved here in 2007. He was living here on Lopez Island. When I moved here, I realized that it was going to be really hard to continue doing that because there's a 45-minute ferry ride, plus there's an hour wait on either end in ferry lines, if you're lucky. And then there's the drive to SeaTac. So I thought, this isn't going to work anymore, which was just the same time that Zoom and Skype and everything was starting to come, into the fore. So I thought, I'm just going to start teaching digitally. And sometimes I teach in groups, but usually I teach personally one-on-one. And I have found that one-on-one experience with people is so much deeper than in a group. Groups are great and they're fun and all kinds of things happen and all kinds of things come up. But when you get one-on-one with somebody, you can go to places that you can't go in a group because people feel safer. And Pam's nodding because she knows so well. She's taken so many of my courses and she's writing a beautiful book right now that I'm editing. She's taken what she learned from me way back, 10 years ago or something, and just run with it. Started her own painting company, business, is doing all sorts of painting, all sorts of exhibits. So people have a chance one-on-one to really express that they didn't have so much in the group. Because group dynamics are group dynamics. There's always stuff going on in the group and things coming up, and that teaches people a lot. It's great. It's very worthwhile. But the one-on-one experience is much deeper.
Yeah. And I was going to ask as well, something that just, intuitively spoke to me, and I could be completely wrong about this, but when you were speaking about, and I believe is his name, Master Paul at the Order of Man's, and when you were talking about how he said he was going to take the journey with you, I'm almost wondering, it's something I just I felt something. And so, and I'm completely open to being wrong on this. And I was going to ask you, as far as, is this something that is an experience for you when you're working with students? Is there a sense of you taking that journey with them?
Oh, of me taking the journey with them in the same way?
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why when I just restructured my website and I put on the home page, I am home, come with me. Yeah, I know where I am. I can take you here. Come with me. Come on. We can do this. And I have to say, and you have to be willing, of course.
Yeah.
Like you said before, do I, ask people's permission? I mean, I have to have people's permission for everything, especially like when I do readings or something like that. But it's so long as a person is willing and wants to let go of all of the BS, let's go. I mean, there's no holds barred. We can go as far as you want to go.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, just as just coming from someone who has, there again, I don't know, this could be a belief as well for me, that I may need to let go of, just that I've been on some sort of spiritual journey for almost 30 years. And I was going to ask you, do you find that as far as people being willing, is it sometimes not an all or nothing proposition? Do you find that maybe students are sometimes, maybe they're 50%, not that it's a qualitative judgment, but is being willing to, or giving permission fully, sometimes is that a process for people that you're working with,
It
just in
is.
terms of their readiness to fully embrace these things you're sharing with them?
Yes, and to verbalize it just a little differently. I feel, and I'm doing a class, I'm just starting, in fact, I'm taking next week off to just work on this class called the DNA of Enlightenment. I'm aware that the awareness that we call enlightenment lives within ourselves. It lives within us. And the desire is there for everyone, in everyone. Even the guy that's out there, robbing banks. If you take all that stuff away and you get him, sit him down, you're going to get to the same place. The problem is the mind and the beliefs that are programmed into that mind, so that there's various things that people think are important to pay attention to in life that aren't important. The I am that we are doesn't care about anything. It's absolutely impersonal, which is really scary to a human being. And a lot of people don't like that idea that God doesn't care. But I would say, how could God care more about you than me? Or this country or that country, or this sports club or that sports club? It's completely neutral. So the mind thinks, oh, this is important. I have to be doing this. I have to be doing that. Where inside the heart is saying, why don't you let go? Why don't you just let it happen? Why don't you just let it all be? A lot of this is in Pam's book, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
It's a yearning that is so deep that it literally lives within our DNA itself. And yet the mind will take over. And I can sit there and I can talk for hours to somebody who's nodding their head and saying, yes, and you're right, and I really want that. And then the next time we get on a call, we're in the same place. And I just say, okay, I'm just sitting back here waiting. I'm just waiting for you. That's all I can do is wait for you, because you've decided that this was more important. The thing that makes me always laugh is that I realize once out of body, that person's going to look at it and go, oh, that thing that I thought was so important, it's nothing. So there is that. The people who usually really, quote unquote, get it and really run with it are people who have been through enough shit in their life that they realize it's all shit. And they say, okay, I'm done with it. I just don't want to do this anymore. There's got to be something else. Usually those are the people that really go for it. And it could be when they were children, trauma that comes back up. It could be during their adult life. It could be anything. But eventually people get to the place where they realize that all of this stuff that they're experiencing just means nothing. And then they can decide how they're going to embrace this realm of all possibilities, which means that anything is possible. You name it, it's all possible. What do you want to do? And then we can really take the ball and run, so to speak, which is fun.
Oh yeah, and I was going to ask as well, is that sometimes is that part of the part of the process? In other words, is in terms of on your part, is this something that it isn't necessarily? Is it something that has gotten easier to do, to just let people go through their process until they are ready? Or?
It's always been easy for me because my childhood was hard, and I look back at that and I think, okay, if it hadn't been so hard, say I had this glorious childhood with mom and dad. My father was running for governor when he was killed. I mean, it was going to be a pretty fancy life. We had maids, we had the whole schmear. What if I was raised like that? Would I still have said, I want out? I just want to go into the cloister. I don't know. Maybe. If people could understand me, maybe I would have. But I think that the foundations that get laid, and it doesn't have to be, again, in your childhood, it could be anywhere in your life, where things just begin to become obvious that this kind of life isn't the kind you want, then you're ready to take that next step. But I have found, basically, I've always seen it this way. ever since I was a child, because of especially after the things that happened in the high school that I was in, because I was going to graduate and I was going to go into the monastery, and then here's all of this stuff that's going on, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, none of this is real. So my view has always been just let people do what they're going to do, and if they leave, they'll come back around or not, or find somebody else. It's not important. It's an invitation, and the person has to be willing to accept the invitation. Pushing doesn't work.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, one of the things that when I was reading about you, that I was very intrigued by was the understanding that sometimes that people do wear masks, and I certainly understand that as I have been one of those people in my life at different times as well, and that I've loved how you were talking about the fact that there is that at the end of the day that you are letting people know that they're not going to be able to do that with you. In other words, that you can see behind the mask.
Oh,
and
yeah.
in a lot of ways, I just feel that unconditional love when I read that's because that is so human in a lot of cases, isn't it? Trying to not necessarily wanting, if they're working with you, maybe not wanting you to see behind that mask, or to let you see, not that it's about you, but I think in this case, it sounds like do you find that it is sometimes about them, that it's a process, being willing to take off that mask and let you see behind it, and let them see let you see who they really are?
Well, it's always true that I can see who they really are before they take off the mask.
Yeah.
And if people keep the mask on for, say, 2 sessions, two classes, then I let them know that I can see what's really going on. And they either like it or they don't. But because, how do you put this into words? I'm going to use words here, but words are not useful, all right, in this moment. Because we are one, because we're all God and we are one, there's no barrier between you and me. There's nothing that's keeping me from you, even though we're on a screen. So I can feel you, I can sense you. And that sensing, I just hold on to it and wait and see how long it takes for the person to come to this place that I am sensing. If it, like, as I said, the first time people meet me on the screen, I realize that there's a little bit of, oh, I'm talking to the teacher, and I'm like, oh, come on. I usually swear. I'll just say, oh, get the fuck off of it. I'll just say something like that, just to slam into it and say, come on, stop.
Yeah.
And if this doesn't work, then by the second one, I'll just really, let them know that I can see what's going on. Most people by that time divest themselves of their fake persona. Some people don't. Very few, but a few don't.
Yeah.
And I'll just stay with it until we're through with the course. I mean, most courses, I guess the longest course is the Divine Intensive. I guess Living I Am. That's 10 sessions. Okay. And after 10 sessions, I'll say, well, we are where we are, and you're going to do what you're going to do. It was nice. See you later. Goodbye. Not too much I can do about it. But most people don't last that long. Either they bail or they take the mask off. It's really a matter, again, of how vested you are in the life that you're living and what you think is important. And sometimes people will say, no, I'm not doing that. I'll say, oh, yeah, really? Well, how about this? I've got a student, Chris. I really thought he'd be on this call just because he loves to be on these calls, but he also has a business and he's busy. And he has this famous story he tells, and it's true. When he was taking my metaphysics course, at the end of each lesson, you have an opportunity to send me information or not. You don't need to. You can just do the exercises and then we talk. He would write a little volume each time, and I'd read through it and I'd go, oh, it's about that. And I'd just circle the word, and we would get on that. And then at the time it was just Skype at the time. We'd get on Skype and he'd say, well, what do you think? And I'd go, well, how about that word on page 3? This is what we're going to talk about. And he always talks about how disappointing it was to realize that he had spent all of this time expounding about all he could figure out and know. And the only thing that I saw that was important was what was important. And the rest was just a bunch of BS. And yeah, Pam goes, yeah. And that's really what I look for, is what words are you using that betray you? Like you used a word. You used a word in your email. I printed it out. It's right here. You said,
I love that.
You said, just a guy who's been on the spiritual journey for almost 30 years, and my work in the world is just me working on myself. And I'm going, working? And with my karma, two of my least favorite words.
Which ones? I'm sorry?
Working and karma. I'm working on myself. Why in the hell would you want to work on yourself? Why not enjoy and play and have fun? And karma, the idea of karma is, I've got all this stuff that happened that I did. Now I have to pay for it. And karma really just means something that comes around. That's all it does. It just comes around because of who we are. But it told me where you were or are, maybe by this was a few days ago. So
and I'm so glad you brought this up. In fact, I welcome this because I really, in fact, at some point I didn't know if I was going to remember or not that I actually wanted to talk to you about this part of it, because I was going to say, in terms of beliefs and letting go of those things, it's really weird. And I'll say this, just being completely vulnerable. I grew up, basically I was raised as in the Jewish tradition. Not that it really matters, but essentially it was a I guess what I call a Judeo-Christian way of, of believing and looking at the world, and went from that about 30 years ago to Eastern thought and philosophy. So it's very interesting to me to realize, and I'm so glad you said this, because it really busted a belief and it opened it up for me, or it busted it open for me to realize that I left one belief system. And even though I see myself as much more of a new age, open-minded, but then again, those are beliefs too, right? Those are words. But yet, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I literally had been believing this for so long and realizing that, yes, I am flawed and I do need to work on myself, and that I've got all this karma that I've accumulated, but I got to work on it. I'm not there yet. I'm not, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think that is it so human to think these things about ourselves? Is this, that we can, and I've spent the last 30 years believing this.
Sure.
It's a lot of time to spend. Yeah.
Well, especially since it is absolutely expounded over and over again on the internet, in books, everywhere, by the new age spiritual world that's just become a cult unto itself, about how we have to do this and we have to do that, and the candles have to be here and the crystals have to be there, and the incense and the everything. And you can meditate just as well sitting on the railroad tracks with some poor starving dog as you can sitting on your cushion. None of it makes any difference, but there's become this idea that it does. And of course, it's all fostered by basic mainstream religion too. In mainstream religion, you're never enough. Being raised as a Catholic, it was impossible to be good enough. Forget it. You can't be. But when we realize that we are divine, all that is all that is. So if all that is all that is, that means that we are all that is, because it's everything. So if we're all that is, then how can we be wrong, incorrect, bad? We might choose to do something differently, or not like something we're doing and say, oh, I'm done with that. I'm not going to do that anymore. But while we're experiencing it, it's still the divine I am experiencing it. It doesn't make any difference what it is. Everything. And I had an interview once with a fellow that posted it on YouTube, and man, the comments just were at me like crazy about all of the bad things that are going on in the world, and da 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 da. And then a few people eventually emailed me and said, sorry, it's a personal thing for me. And that's why they had taken it so strongly, that something bad had happened in their life and therefore it was bad. That they couldn't possibly ever realize that it is the divine experiencing that as them. And hence why I teach absolution. On my webpage is an absolution page, text, audio, video format, where you absolve anyone or any situation of any wrongdoing, because all you're doing is having an experience with that person. And of course, you have to absolve yourself first. You can't give what you haven't got. so that everyone, doesn't mean you might want to be with that person a lot or in that situation a lot. Maybe it's not fun, not comfortable. Okay, but it doesn't mean it's wrong or bad. It's just what they are being. And it's all just experience. And it can be either a big bite to chew or a little bite to chew. And sometimes when people talk to me about things that have happened in their lives that look like great big bites, I say, do the absolution experience every day. You've been living with this pain for 20 years. Don't expect that one set of words overnight is going to make it go away, but you use it consistently and it will change you until you come to the realization that there's nothing to hold on to. And then you're free. Doesn't everybody want freedom? That's what everybody wants, freedom. I just want to be free. Don't want to be tied to all these beliefs and thoughts and things I have to do.
Is that part of this too, that as humans, and I can't speak for everyone, I just, at least all I can know is my own experience, but is it some of this about the fact that is it a lot more simple? And I don't know if that's a fair question. Is this a lot more simple than sometimes, or I guess I'll say the reverse of this. Sometimes as human beings, are we making it more complicated than it has to be?
Yeah, the mind wants it to be complex so it has something to play with. When it's really simple and it's really easy, go into your heart. Sometimes people will say, how do you do that? And what I like to tell them is, sometimes it's hard to just think of going into your heart, especially since it's gotten such press. I mean, it's become a thing unto its own. Everybody should be in their heart. Go into your belly, go into your gut, go into your navel, right there in your gut, and feel, because the heart and the gut both have their own brains. They both do their own thing. So go to this place where this other brain lives that's connected to the heart brain, and just feel from there. What does it feel like in there? And you'll always know what you want. You'll always know how you want it. You'll always know when you're afraid. When you're afraid, don't you feel it in your gut? You just, But when you just let it open and you just let it be and you connect that with your heart, then you can just feel this flow. And it flows really easy. And there's nothing to be afraid of. People always tell me that they don't like confrontation. Well, I just don't like to confront. I said, oh, my middle name's Confrontation. Bring it on. Because I know I'm God. Therefore, whatever you're going to come at me with, I know I have got more to respond with than you have. I have no doubt. Because I know who I am. And if you want to confront me, that already tells me you don't know who you are. Otherwise, why would you be doing that? So let's play. Take out your lightsaber. I will too. A friend of mine once asked me if I would have a conversation with this fellow down the street who was always coming over. He was a Bible thumper. And he was always coming over with this bag of apples as an intro to get in the house, and then doing this Bible thumping. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? He says, I just want to see you talk to him. I don't know what to say to him. Because this friend of mine really had no religion, wasn't raised in any religion. He didn't know what to do with all this Bible talk. I said, okay, invite him over. We'll just see what happens. So the guy came over with his apples and we began talking. And finally he looked at me and he said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And I said, okay, why? Because you have an answer for everything. I just run out of answers and you just have an answer for everything. And I said, well, of course you run out of answers because you're trying to quote a book. So you have to remember what's in the book. I just know what we are. So there's an answer for everything you're asking me. This isn't hard. So we kind of huffed and puffed out of there. But that's really where it is when you're not trying to adhere to some belief system that you've been programmed with, and you allow this knowing, which I sometimes call cosmic consciousness, to just be the way you let things flow, then you don't have to be concerned. Because the answers and the words will always be there. They exist everywhere. Information is everywhere. So why be concerned about having to confront someone? How fun. But also to disarm them. because everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be listened to. Everybody wants to be cared about. And anybody who's confrontational doesn't feel cared about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think sometimes that's part of that has to happen? In other words, that's ultimately what leads to people finally giving up those beliefs. That sometimes it has to get, I don't want to use the word like it has to get ugly, so to speak, but sometimes does it have to get a little bit messy before someone is really willing to take off the mask?
Look at President Trump.
Yeah.
Look at how confrontational he is. I began reading the book that his niece wrote, Mary. She's a psychologist. I wasn't sure if I was going to read it because I usually don't like to read books by women because they become very feminine and very, kind of wimpy. I was hoping she'd write as a psychologist, and she did. And she talked about their childhood and the fact that he and his brothers had no mother. I mean, the mother was there in body, but she wasn't there, literally. And how he always wanted to please his father, but no matter how hard he tried, his father would always put him down. You could not please the father. You could not do enough. So it created this very confrontational personality that, of course, we are seeing in the United States. And it really doesn't make any difference whether you like Trump or you like Biden or you don't like anybody. What you're seeing on the screen is a man who is constantly having to confront because he doesn't feel that he's cared about from the time he was 2. So that's magnifying it. When people say, what do you think is going on right now? We're looking at this magnification of the human race, of how much people want to be cared about and feel as though they're worthy and worthwhile. And when they don't feel that, things like that happen. When you let somebody know that they are cared about, that it's all okay, things change. Excuse me. And it goes for everybody. Think of the times that you felt less than, or the people weren't paying attention, and how it makes you feel.
Yeah. I mean, as you're saying that, that's definitely I'm definitely feeling that. That is a familiar. Yes, that is something that I certainly have dealt with before. Not that this is about me, but yes, definitely can see that.
To a certain degree, it is about you. This is your program.
That's a belief.
It's all about you. You're blushing. I love it. Anybody who gets in front of a camera and puts on a program, it's about them, and they might as well own it to start with.
Yes, that's so. Yes, but see, that's another belief too, right? I mean, that even in of itself is another belief.
It's what Jeff wants to give back to the world.
Yeah.
You said you want to have these conversations. You want people to hear. This is what you want to do.
Yeah.
You can own it 100%. It's all about Jeff Krisman. Yes, and the rest of us are supporting actors in your play.
I love this. And this is all ringing so true to me. But then again, it's the whole idea about, I guess there's the part of me, the caretaking part of me, and the part of me that wants to honor people. In other words, I definitely do want to hear what people are saying. I do want to give people a chance to share who they are and their journey. But I realize, I guess I can see what you're saying though, that if I don't own this, I can't necessarily make this to where I'm not a part of it, Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
No, because you're the hub of the wheel here. The 3 of us that are on this screen are going around you.
Yeah.
You're the hub. Okay. And when you realize then that your energy is like the spokes going out, and then the wheel turns around, and so everybody who's going to be watching this video is going to be affected by that the energy that's going through the spokes. Everybody's going to be affected by it because it's your energy at the core, and the rest of us are just holding the space around you. Very
interesting. This is definitely a kind of conversation that I have not had before, and so I think to a certain degree, while I am opening to it and feeling very comfortable with it, I definitely am. Yeah, it is a very different conversation in a lot of ways, and I'm glad about that, and I'm happy about that. But I'm probably also a little bit out of my element. You know, there's a little bit of, yeah, but it feels good to be vulnerable and open up and take the mask off, as it were.
Okay, let's play here.
Yeah.
How are you out of your element?
Oh, just in terms of, talking more about me, and I think somehow I've had this this conscious and unconscious belief that whenever I have these conversations, that it's almost like I try to deflect. I mean, I'm not afraid to speak at all or talk about my experiences, but I think there has been this tendency for me to maybe feel like I have done that too much, and so I'm always trying to kind of ride a fine line where, yes, I am willing to talk a little bit about me, but I'm really wanting it to not be about me. That I really want to give people an opportunity to share their life and their journey, if that's not too wordy.
No, which is really unusual. I should not 100% unusual, but quite unusual. I've been interviewed a lot. And many of the interviews that I've done have been listening to the story of the person interviewing me. And then I throw in a few words here and there, and then they talk about themselves, and I throw in a few words. Oh yeah, that's been a lot.
Yeah.
At the same time, realize that you're a really good conversationalist, because I'm not having to work at having a conversation with you, which has been the other thing, where the person doing the interview says nothing. They ask a question and then they just sit there for 20 minutes. And so I have to keep talking, because otherwise we've got dead air. And then I wait and nothing happens, and I talk some more. So you can own that what you're doing, what you're putting out for everybody, you're doing really, really well. And it makes it easy. It makes it really simple. You could do, say for instance, Pam and Iris, and say there were 6 more people on this screen, you could do a conversation where everybody got to put in what they wanted to put in, and you could hold that center point, which is what I do with some classes that I do when we do.
Oh, yeah.
I hold the center point, I'll let everybody else talk, but I manage it, okay?
Yeah.
You would be really good at that, really good at that. Because you can, just looking at you, a person is comfortable to start with. Secondly, your voice tones and the way you ask questions lead people to talk and feel as though they want to hear what you're going to say back. So you would keep conversations moving in a group easily, and it would be fun.
Very interesting. I appreciate this feedback. I really do. I had never, and when I say, and I also wanted to say to you, just out of my element, I think it's just the fact that you've given me this opportunity to be more of me, and to be vulnerable and to be open. I mean, I am definitely really enjoying the conversation. I'm certainly completely comfortable, but I think this is an opportunity, a moment for me to realize that maybe I've been kind of guarding that a little bit too much. I mean, I feel like my heart's in the right place, but it's, I'm trying to kind of keep it very minimal, as far as the me in this. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you had a group of people, you wouldn't have much chance for meanness at all. There'd be a lot of everybody else's going on. So you could put that aside.
Yeah. Thank you. And I was going to ask you too, just as far as to, calling back to what we were speaking about a little while ago in terms of people finally, taking the mask off, and even though you can see through it, before they do, but I assume that there's also some significance to them finally being willing to do that. But I was going to ask you too, as part of this, as far as the spiritual journey for people, and I don't know if this is a fair question or not either, is this sometimes because we're so busy, people are so busy doing, feeling like they have, like, kind of like I said, I'm working on myself. I have to do this, and this. That is, there somehow we're getting lost in the busyness of this, that even the spiritual journey, just like our day-to-day lives, can we kind of clutter that up with a lot of stuff to do?
Yes, and I'm just thinking of, let's see, did she say she was going to be on this call? I'm looking at my list of people. Yes, she did. So she'll watch the video. One of my students that I have known for probably, let's see, this is 2020, maybe 15 years, maybe longer, maybe 25 years. It's been a long time. Anyway, let's put it this way. It was back when I was getting voicemail on a telephone.
Wow.
That's how I
Yeah.
got, okay, that's how I was introduced to this lady. We worked together on the phone, and then I went and visited her back east several times, she and her husband, and they did a lot of work with me. And then she kind of faded off in the background, and then she kind of came back, and then she kind of faded off again. And finally she came back just recently last year. And I have a big testimonial that's on my website of what she said. And she said what happened to her, because she's also in the business world, she works in the medical profession, and so she's very busy managing this clinic, etc. She had gone out to various coaching, spiritual counseling, blah, 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 blah sites, and taken all these different courses and done this and that. And she was just at the point where it felt like she could never achieve enough. She could never get there. And so she came back to me, and we did a divine intensive. And the main thing that came out of that divine intensive is that she now binge watches Netflix, because that's what she needs to do.
Yeah.
And she's come to peace, because she realizes she doesn't have to do all these things. It's all this doing and achieving and trying and goal setting and all these things that everybody's trying to get to that stops them from being where they are. So now evenings and weekends are sitting around with her dog and her husband and reading books and watching Netflix and riding on his motorcycle and whatever it takes just to have fun and enjoy life. And she's at peace. She said, I've never been at such peace before. Because she's not trying to achieve something. She always realizes that she is all she needs to be, exactly as she is. And that is so big for someone to recognize, that there is nothing you need to achieve at all. Nothing. All you have to do is breathe. And when you breathe, you change your reality. And you can change your reality however you want to. But all you have to do is breathe to make it happen. Think about taking a breath. You inhale, and you're inhaling everything that's in the room. And when you're exhaling out everything that you are. And then when you're inhaling everything in the room plus everything that you are. So what do you want that to be? It isn't about achievement. You can do things, you can have fun, you can play, you can paint. You can do anything you want to do, so long as it's fun. I talked with a lady this morning whose absolute achievement in life is playing the harp. I mean, she just loves the harp. And she's found a group now who's going to do music over the internet for hospice. And she's going to be the harp player. Isn't that gorgeous?
Yeah, I love that.
She was talking about it, and I told her, I said, I've got tears in my eyes. I started to cry. I mean, I just thought that is just magnificent. Because this is her joy, not because she's trying to play the harp for hospice. It's her joy. It's what is your joy? That's all you need to think about is what is your joy? What brings me joy? Sitting in this chair petting my cat, great. Pet the cat.
Yeah.
Eventually you'll want to do something else, but for right now, pet the cat. Doesn't make any difference, because you're I am. And you're just experiencing whatever you're experiencing. So what do you want to experience? As I am. What feels good? You take all the beliefs and all of the caveats and all of the stuff and just throw it out the window.
I'm so grateful that that you shared this with me. And I was going to say, because I think in a lot of ways, I can look at myself and realize I've spent the last 30 years, this work. And I can honestly say, though, too, there have been some moments where I have been able to, get a glimpse of what you're speaking of. But at the same time, instead of resting in that, I can see that then there, begins to be that agenda again. And there's that, I definitely feel like I've had some fleeting glimpses of that along the way. And I wonder, is that part of it too, that, it's a matter of people. I'm wondering, do you help people to be able to see that? Maybe they have gotten glimpses here and there, but
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
matter of being able to really slow down for a moment, or just to be able to open your eyes and see it.
Definitely. And each of us is our best teacher. You know the times when you get tied up, when you get like, oh, I've got to do this because you know those times. And those are the times when you go and you sit down and you do nothing. People often ask me, do you, Tony, do things that come up in your life, and I go, yeah, from time to time, something will come up and rear its little head and say, what about me? And I just go and sit in my chair. I literally stop everything I'm doing, period. I don't care what it is. I just sit down and I go, okay, so what is this here for? Why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this? What is this about? And then you can decide what you're going to do with it. Then it doesn't come back around again, or at least not as often. But when you just get into it and you decide that you have to do all these things in a certain way because, that's where you get stuck. Because it's all beliefs. Even a person who says, I don't have a belief system. I have no belief system. Okay, that's your belief system. Everybody has a belief system of something. So what is my belief about? Oh my gosh, that table is so dusty. I have to dust it. Okay, why? Why do I have to dust it? Well, because my mother told me not to have dusty tables. Okay, do you have to do that then? Do you actually have to, or can you just leave the dust? I'm going to leave the dust. I'll just, if that comes up, I'll just leave it for a while. Because why do you have to do something? Because that's what your mind is saying you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I have to meditate twice a day. Why? Well, because everybody knows you have to. Who's everybody? Meditate or not. Who cares? Do it if it makes you happy. There was a great book that I just kind of read that I saw the other day. It was just hysterical. I love the guy's writing. It was about, I can't remember the title, but the gist of it was the best way to meditate, okay? And I thought, oh, I got to see what this person has to say. And it was all about making yourself as comfortable as possible. Get rid of the breath exercises, get rid of the mantras, get rid of the cushions. Find the chair that you sit in to watch television and you sit back with your popcorn. Find that chair, get in that chair. Now let go. And I thought, oh, I love it. It's so great. Because we have all these things that we have to do that aren't important. If you really want to let go inside to yourself, make your physical body so comfortable that you can stop paying attention to it and then go in.
Yeah. I assume that's a lot of that too, that all the tension we're holding in our bodies, that feedback between the body and the mind. And,
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Or the beliefs about the body or the way it's supposed to be. And yeah.
Yes, everything has to be a certain way. And yes, da 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 da. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not, none of it's true. It's just what somebody's decided. Somebody's made it up. I often tell people, and I don't think too many people do it because it's a lot of work, but I often tell people to take a belief they have and trace it back to its origin point.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for instance, the great story that I use is the ham story. And I read this in a ladies' magazine in the dentist's office one day. And now it's all over the internet in various iterations. I looked it up, it's everywhere. Anyway, the story is that this guy wants to help his wife fix Easter dinner because the whole family's coming and they've got lots of family. And she goes, okay, what do you want to do? And he says, I want to cook the ham. And she goes, you can't cook the ham. You don't know how to cook a ham. And he goes, well, yeah, you put the ham in a pan and you put a thermometer in it and you cook it until the thermometer says it's cooked. And she goes, see, I knew you don't know. And he goes, okay, you tell me how to cook a ham. And she said, you have to cut the ends off the ham. And he goes, you do? And he goes, well, everybody knows that. Okay, I'll cut the ends off the ham. So he does. He thinks, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Dinner time comes. Everybody's there. So he looks at his wife's mother, who's sitting across from him. And he says, did you teach your daughter here to cut the ends off the ham before she cooks it? And she goes, well, yeah, that's how you cook a ham. Everybody knows that. He goes, okay. So her mother was there. Great-grandma was there. So he says to great-grandma, did you teach your daughter to cut the ends off the ham before she cooks it. And she goes, Sonny, teacher? I didn't teach her nothing. I didn't have a pan big enough to hold the ham, so of course I cut the ends off the ham. And it went down through the family, but that's the only
That's
way.
great.
That's how beliefs begin.
Yes.
They
Yes.
always
Oh my
begin
goodness.
that way. And it,
Yeah.
from what you use to brush your teeth, to your religion, to the kind of clothes you wear, to how you keep your house, to what you eat for dinner or not, it all goes back to somebody who didn't have a pan big enough for the ham and came up with this belief. And then you buy into it because, of course, everybody knows that type of thing. Everybody knows that's true. Well, look at the things that we believe in the United States that are true, and now go over to Afghanistan. You wouldn't even be close.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to spend a couple of weeks in Egypt several years ago, and oh wow, okay. The things you have to get used to about what kind of food there is and there isn't. Bathrooms, interesting places.
Oh yeah.
You know, and it just everything is so totally different because, and to them, that's the way it always is. That's the way life is. And to hear, this is the way life is. It doesn't mean that that is what is. It just is different experiences. And it's all about belief. So look at all your beliefs. It's fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And very liberating. Is what I'm gathering. Yeah, and as we're coming to a conclusion in terms of beliefs, this is one that really I was reading and thank you so much for the opportunity to read your latest book. And I wanted to mention there was something, I believe it was one of the chapters, if I'm not mistaken, and it really spoke to me. You know, there again is that belief of, you know, someone on the spiritual path or living a spiritual life, about finding your tribe and about how that can become this overarching belief. And I must tell you again, you know, to be completely vulnerable and open, I have spent the last 30 years looking for that tribe, have had very little success. But I will say that what you had to say about that, and I don't want to try to say that, you know, I don't want to try to capture that with my own words, but it was so freeing in so many ways. I don't know how common this is with people that are on that spiritual journey.
Oh yeah, everybody. You want community, and it has to be like-minded people.
Like-minded, yes, I love
Give
that.
it 6 months, and then just come back and tell me how that worked. Yeah, like-minded is a very relative term.
Yeah, that was the most, to me, and I thank you so much, because that was the most freeing, what you shared about that and the truth of that it was so unbelievably freeing. I found myself literally, like, you know, crying tears of joy. I was laughing and giggling at the same time, just the utter silliness of my belief that, and the going here and going there and going to this event and going to that, and just all that, and just holding my arms out. And kind of like when I was a 4-year-old kid, I think it was my mother told me, I would just walk around and say, will you be my friend? You know, will you? I mean, I was always asking people, but yet here I am as an adult doing the very same thing. Yeah. Wasting a lot of time and a lot of, I mean, I know it's nice to get out and socialize with people, but in terms of, you know, being so attached to, I've got to find my tribe. I know they're out there. I've got to find them, you know, yeah. My goodness. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, dear. My pleasure, to be sure.
And I thank you so much just for taking this time. This has been, just in a lot of ways, it has really it has allowed me to let go of some beliefs about, you know, what I'm doing, what I'm doing when I have these conversations. And I'm so glad. I'm so grateful to you for that. It's been a wonderful experience.
Thank you. This has been delightful. Very, very enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And wanted to thank Pam and Iris as well for being being a part of in participating, you know, as far as being here with us. And I'm really appreciative.
Thank you, Jeff.
Certainly. Thank you.
All righty.